Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Rising. Saagar, what do we got today?
Well, the President of the United States kicked off his re-election campaign. I sat down with the acting director of ICE, and we're going to debate Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's new shot at President Trump.
I'm sure we agree on all of those things. We'll get into all of that and so much more today on Rising.
We did it once, and now we will do it again, and this time we're going to finish the job.
Oh boy, a lot going on. What are you looking at, my friend?
I'm taking a look at the president kicking off his 2020 campaign last night in Orlando, Florida. There were echoes of 2016 throughout the speech when the president said he recalled the Mueller investigation, he recalled Hillary Clinton, the deep state, the swamp. He said that they're going to do it all again and that for the last 2.5 years they've been under siege. Let's take a listen to what he said.
For the last 2.5 years, we have been under siege. And with the Mueller report, we won. And now they want a do-over. They want a do-over. Let's do it again.
Similar dynamics to the 2016 election. He's against the establishment. He's running against the deep state. He's saying drain the swamp. You could have given many of him and the vice president's speeches last night any time on the 2016 campaign trail, which really does lead to the question whether this is Keep America Great as the slogan that the president unveiled last night, or if it is Make America Great Again. And since 2016, we haven't seen any of the dramatic promises that the president promised on the 2016 campaign trail. Healthcare remains exactly the same, with some minor tweaks in the executive branch. Immigration remains exactly the same. The levels are the same. And in fact, border arrivals at the southern border are up. On trade, we've made some minor progress with a USMCA or a new NAFTA agreement with a few tweaks here and there, which might protect American workers on the margin, but nothing that was dramatic or promised. There's no bilateral deal with China. There's no bilateral deal with the United Kingdom. There's a new bilateral deal with South Korea, but some of the analysts that have taken a look at that say that, again, it was a marginal difference. So is it Keep America Great? The economy is fine. But the economy as it's structured, people are still suffering. Make America Great Again, Krystal, I think speaks to the heart and the spirit of the Trump campaign from the original 2016. I think he was very smart in order to run on that. I don't think going after Hillary Clinton or any of this other stuff. I'm not entirely sure why he continues to do that, other than I know that the base
I think it's just a verbal tick. He just can't help it.
But at the heart of it, this is about a person who is running against the establishment in Washington.
Yeah.
The only thing that the GOP was ever united on under his administration was support for the tax cuts. And the tax cuts, by all accounts, have been a great gift to corporate power.
Absolutely.
Who have now reconciled themselves to Trump, but only on this particular arena. If you look at any of the things for people that voted for him, the GOP, the corporate money, most of Washington remains entirely united against him. There are still 15,000 troops in Afghanistan, 1,000 more sent to the Middle East to respond to the Iranian conflict just this week. Iraq is still a mess. Our global footprint remains the same. Our immigration system remains the same. Our trade imbalance largely remains the same.
Actually, those things are worse.
Yes, in many ways. And I feel for him because I know that he actually wants to do something about it. But now he's had 2.5 years to actually try. And I have great criticisms of the president's staff and many of the way that they've executed it. But I think Make America Great Again should remain the slogan because that really speaks to the heart of what this entire movement is about.
Well, and also CAG just sounds really bad. It's really bad. Well, okay, so it's really interesting because I went back and I read his victory speech. And I also read back his speech from the RNC to look at what were the promises that were made and how has he done on them. And with very few exceptions, to your point, he has failed. I mean, the central core promise was on immigration, and whoever you want to blame, the reality is, in terms of his promise, he has failed, right? I mean, catch and release, which Republicans absolutely hate, continues, right? You have more people coming across the border.
Well, I wouldn't say Republicans hate it. I would say Trump hates it.
Trump Republicans, which is now essentially the whole Republican Party. But he is completely, even on the most simple thing that should have been a gimme on day one, infrastructure, which he talked about a lot, which I thought would be the first thing out of the gates. Democrats would have worked with him on it, still has failed to deliver. However, I will say that the sort of central promise of his campaign was basically putting the liberal elite in their place. And on that, people feel like he has delivered. So all the hand-wringing about the Twitter and how uncouth he is and all that stuff, like, people are there for that. That is part of what they say. And so on that central promise, which I think really was core, he's delivered the goods, and that's why his people are still so behind him.
But he hasn't really put them in their place. He's just inflamed them, and in fact, they're doubling down now and backing Joe Biden to replace Trump in the White House. So if anything, the way that Joe Biden talks about this is exactly how the liberal elite feels. It's an aberration. We can just go back. The GOP is really this party of old, even though GOP voters for the last 30 years have been like, hey, please stop invading countries, please restrict immigration, and please fix our trade policies. That's literally all they want. And all three of those things remain pretty much exactly the same today.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So Make America Great Again, I think, still speaks to the truth, the core of the Trump campaign.
Yeah, I was surprised he didn't that there was really nothing new last night. I was expecting some new refrain or some new something, but
I think Trump realizes that he cruised in on a single message alone, and why move away from that? He's
going to stick with what's working.
What are you taking a look at, Krystal?
All right, so I am looking at a subset of what we've been talking about. So this new battle this week between AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, versus President Trump. So on Monday, in anticipation of his big re-election launch, President Trump tweeted out that ICE was going to begin removing millions of, quote, illegal aliens who've illicitly found their way into the United States. Now, never mind the fact that that is probably technically impossible. We don't have the resources or the planning or the whatever to be able to do that. But that was the promise Monday, again, as a sort of political framing going into his re-election that happened last night. And in response, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had this to say about the detention centers that migrants are being held in today.
The United States is running concentration camps on our southern border. And that is exactly what they are. They are concentration camps. I want to talk to the people that are concerned enough with humanity to say that we should not, that never again means something.
So this, of course, sparked a total political firestorm. And now everybody is out debating whether our detention centers on the southern border for migrants, many of whom are seeking asylum, are in fact equivalent to concentration camps. And what was incredible to me to watch is the way that the framing and the inflammatory rhetoric that AOC uses here has created a debate that is actually very favorable for Democrats. When the president put out his inflammatory, we're going to round up millions of migrants, then the conversation, the debate had to be about what do we do with people who have broken the law, right? A lot of Americans feel like, okay, if you're here illegally, you should be sent back. That's actually not very strong ground for Democrats to stand on. AOC has effectively reframed the debate, so now we're talking about the abhorrent conditions that migrants are held in these detention camps, and isn't this an un-American way to deal with this situation? So a lot of times we hear about Trump's 4D chess, which I think is very much, by the way, overplayed and overblown. But I actually think everyone should calm down on the Democratic side. There's a lot of hand-wringing about AOC and all the damage that she's doing to the party. But on this issue and on many others, she really appears to be playing 4D chess. She has reframed the immigration debate single-handedly to be on stronger footing for Democrats. And whether you're comfortable with that language or not, the turf of what are we doing with these human beings? How are we treating these human beings is a much better debate for Democrats to be having.
So I think, to your last point, I think you're right. I mean, it was just like Trump in his 2016. He'd be like, they're rapists. And everyone was like, of course, he was denounced as a racist. He was called out. Well, people also started talking about crime amongst illegal immigrants, which is at certain levels.
He got
and
to
that was
drive
something,
the conversation
exactly,
he wanted
was driving
to have.
the conversation. And a lot of people looked at that and said, well, yeah, he went a little bit too far, but there's a kernel of truth in what he said. And that's exactly what I think AOC is doing. I do think her comparison or use of the word concentration camp, particularly the "never again" slogan, which is directly tied to the Holocaust,
But how Trumpy
is inappropriate.
is that?
But it doesn't
because
matter.
She
Yeah,
needs to have plausible deniability
of course
and
it's
say
brilliant.
concentration
Oh, she's been out there. She's like,
look it up in the dictionary.
Exactly. Her
right?
and Chris Hayes and all her other allies are out there saying, "Oh, actually, concentration camps go back to the Boer War of 1919." I'm like, come on. You know exactly what you're doing.
She knows what
and
she's
Trump
doing.
knows exactly what he's doing, and that's why, you know what? To your point. Fair game. She single-handedly changed the conversation. We're here sitting talking about it right now. The rest of the country is too. A lot of people on the left would just say, yeah, maybe concentration camp wasn't the best use of the word, but children are being held in X conditions, and that's deplorable. And now we have to debate whether that's okay
Whether that's
or not.
acceptable or not. Exactly.
So, you know what? You know, props to her, I guess, for accomplishing what she, even though I couldn't
she's a freshman member of Congress,
I could
not the
not
president of the
disagree
United
more
States.
with what she's saying. I think it's ridiculous. The alternative to holding people in detention centers is actually releasing 100,000 people a month into the interior of the country.
But that's a false choice, because I mean I actually completely agree with her classification here, because what you have, the people that you have being held are largely asylum seekers. These are not quote-unquote illegal immigrants. Many of them crossed illegally. Many of them crossed illegally.
That doesn't mean they're legitimate asylum seekers.
The
in fact,
reason,
90% of them ultimately, if we found in the adjudication process, are not found as legitimate.
That is absolutely all of that correct. But if you actually cared about dealing with that, you would approach the situation very differently, which I think you would agree with. I mean, many of them are crossing illegally because they've been metering who can come across. So it takes days, weeks, months. You're sitting at the border, outside, exposed with nowhere to go, so they cross illegally, they present themselves. I mean, it's a situation that could be dealt with in an entirely different, much more humane way, but there's no interest in that from this administration because they like the cruelty.
It wasn't
they think
planned,
it's a deterrent.
It wasn't planned properly. There's been a lot of problems.
No, but I think it is planned properly. I think it's very intentional. No, I mean, they've talked about how they talked about how denying a young woman an abortion could be used as a deterrent to keep people, I mean, that is the mentality here. The cruelty is in part the point, to keep people from making the trip. It's going to be so awful that you shouldn't come. This is all, it is designed to be awful and horrible and inhumane. That is the point.
Well, I would just point that President Obama himself would go on TV all the time saying, please don't come. It's a terrible journey. You will be held. You will be sent back. Bought billboards in Guatemala and throughout the Northern Triangle saying,
deported
do
more
not
people
come.
than
Deported
this president.
1.1 million people. So, you know, it's been a bipartisan thing for a long time, and the system, it remains broken and irrevocably fixed, unfortunately.
Fair, all of that.
Indeed. So next on Rising, my interview with acting ICE Director Mark Morgan. He goes in on Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, calling her recent comments that his agency houses immigrants in concentration camps irresponsible and irredeemable. He also addresses the concept of fake families.
Fake families, and with the rise in a different kind of fake, deep fakes, it is easier than ever to spread fake news. But New York Congresswoman Yvette Clarke's legislation sets out to increase accountability. She tells us more as Rising continues.